13 cases, 7 levels, all packed into one disturbing Iceberg video. We're going to start off with the dark, and then delve deeper into some truly inhumane true crime. I could give you a whole long intro hyping the video, but it's already over 2 hours long, so I should probably shut up. Love ya. This is the true story of Justine Valdez, a hard-working and dedicated young woman, someone that was building a new life with the help of her parents. She had the bravery to move across the planet and worked harder than most to achieve her dreams. But after stepping off the bus one night, she all but vanished. What would become of Justine? Justine Valdez was born in the Philippines in 1994 to parents Teresita and Danilo. She was extremely loved, and her parents wanted more for her than they felt their home country had to offer. Mum and Dad both made the hard decision to move to Enniskerry in the Republic of Ireland, leaving young Justine at home. They did this so that they could build a solid foundation for the future of their daughter, and this is something that they successfully achieved. In 2015, Justine was now in her early 20s and made the big move to live with her parents. She was studying accountancy, a solid career choice indeed. Obviously a very driven and hard-working young woman, Justine also worked as a care assistant and in a restaurant to help ends meet and support the family. She was on the road to success, and her parents were standing right by her side. By Saturday the 19th of May 2018, Justine was now 24 years old. She had blossomed into a beautiful young woman and was making the family's dreams a reality. She had a small stature, standing at just 5 feet tall, but she was packed with drive and enthusiasm. The family, now reunited, cherished their time together more than many of us could imagine. When Justine was out and about, the family would be in almost constant contact. On this day alone, over 60 messages were shared between the three throughout the day. Justine had quite a busy day. She had to visit the police station in order to work towards renewing her residency permit to stay in the country. From there, she went to the gym to get a workout in. At 4:20 p.m, the last reciprocated contact was made between the mother and daughter. Teresita asked Justine to go and buy some bread on the way back to their house. After leaving the gym, still wearing her workout clothes, a white shirt, trainers, grey leggings and a dark jacket, Justine carried out her mother's request and then jumped on the number 185 bus in Bray. This was at 5:40 p.m. The 185 pulled into Enniskerry village just after 6 p.m. and Justine left the bus. She then started the short 15 to 20 minute walk home, but rather than walking through the front door, Justine instead vanished. Mother Teresita noticed almost immediately that something wasn't right here. The contact between the two throughout the day had been almost constant. If Justine had changed her plans, then she definitely would have let her mother know. But there was nothing. She should have been home. Teresita reported her daughter as missing and information began to come together. In fact, before Justine's mother even knew that there was a problem, the police had already received their first call. There were witnesses to Justine getting off the bus. In fact, disturbingly, at 6:24 p.m, the police received a call from a concerned member of the public. The call was from a female driver who was in the car with her son. She saw a woman of Asian descent, dressed in grey leggings, a dark jacket, white t-shirt and trainers, being forced by a man into the boot of a Nissan Qashqai. What she witnessed was horrifying, and the car drove off into the evening. Next, around 10 minutes later, another motorist saw the same Nissan. The woman was still in the car, now screaming. She could be seen in the boot compartment of the Qashqai, banging on the windows, desperately. This woman was Justine Valdez. The second witness originally thought it was a child in the car and considered minding his own business. However, upon returning home to his wife and following a discussion, the man then reported what he had seen to the police. He made this call at around 7:20 p.m, almost an hour since Justine was taken. Police attended the scene that Justine was spotted by the woman being bundled into the boot of the car. At this location, they made a discovery that I found really quite emotional. Her phone was smashed on the floor, and the bread that she had bought for her mother was there, strewn on the floor. Things were going south fast, and the police believed that Justine was in severe danger. The search for Justine Valdez was launched. What followed was a massive search operation. It included patrol cars, dogs, and a police helicopter. Even with the best efforts of police officers, the trail for Justine had gone cold. Saturday night ran into Sunday morning, and suddenly came a breakthrough in the case. At 3 a.m, the owner of the Nissan was identified. It belonged to a married man, a man with 2 young daughters, the younger of which had only been born a few months before in September. He had a respectable job working as a banksman on building sites. This man was named Mark Hennessy. When police turned up to his house, he was nowhere to be found. Bearing in mind this was after 3 a.m, this was quite strange. Police spoke to his wife, Nicola, to try and work out if Mark really did have something to hide. She described how he went to work on the Saturday morning at around 7:30. He then came home after his shift at around 3 p.m, but then he left once more, saying he was going to the pub for a drink. This was at 5:25 p.m, an hour before Justine was taken. Disturbingly, wife Nicola hadn't seen Mark since. She couldn't figure out exactly where he could be. At this time, Mark was the only suspect in Justine's abduction. His friends and family joined the police in looking for Mark. We can only imagine how scared they must have been about what they may find. The pub that Nicola said Mark was going to had a visit from the police. They discovered that he had indeed been there, but only for around 10 minutes while the football was on. Luckily, the pub had CCTV installed and captured Mark leaving at 5:41 p.m. He exited to the car park where his Nissan was parked. He appeared to make a phone call that lasted just 2 minutes, and then he left in his car. Mark in his Nissan Qashqai was then captured once more on CCTV. This time he was driving behind the 185 bus, the bus that Justine was riding home on. But then the trail pretty much went cold until 11 p.m. when Mark returned to the pub. This left over 5 hours of Mark's whereabouts and behaviours unaccounted for. It brought the police no closer to finding out exactly where Justine had been taken to. This case was huge in the local area. Police held a press conference at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night, just over 24 hours since Justine was last seen. They shared the importance of tracking down the Nissan Qashqai, sharing its registration, and they didn't have to wait long before new leads came in from the public. A woman that had watched the press conference on TV had come across the car by chance. She saw the vehicle driving down the road and made the brave decision to follow it. The car pulled over into Cherrywood Business Park, and then she made the call to the authorities. Police sped to the scene and discovered not only the car, but also Mark. It seemed that he too may have caught wind of the press conference, and he knew that his time as a free man was quickly running out. As police approached the car and saw Mark still sat inside, they noticed he was covered in his own vital fluids from a wound he had made with a sharp implement. Mark refused to exit the car and give himself up. A tense standoff ensued. At this time, police believed that Mark still had Justine inside the car. They were scared he may harm her further. Firearms officers were now at the scene and 1 round was fired into the vehicle. Mark was hit in his shoulder. Now in a serious condition, he was pulled from the car. Paramedics tried to save him as police begged him to tell them where Justine was, but they got no response. His injuries would lead to his demise. Mark was no more, taking his secrets to the grave. Hopes of finding Justine alive were dwindling. She was not present in the car. However, police found a note scrawled by Mark left in the vehicle. It was heavily covered in blood, but specialists were able to remove it and read the writing underneath. They could make out the word, sorry, along with what appeared to be a location, Puck's Castle. This was as good a lead as they were going to get, and they sped to the scene. The area surrounding Puck's Castle was then subject to intense searches that ran throughout the night, sadly with no findings. As the sun rose on the 21st of May, 2 days since Justine was last seen, in an area of dense woodland in South Dublin, a body was discovered, quickly confirmed to be that of Justine Valdez. Upon inspection, it was confirmed that Justine had passed as a result of being throttled. This was thought to have happened not long after she was taken by Mark. Also revealed were abrasions and marks on her intimate areas, as well as the presence of a very small amount of an illicit substance taken an hour or two before her passing. Justine was not a user, so the presence of this substance was very unusual. However, it was discovered that Mark was a user, so this more than likely explains the presence of the substance in Justine. Police could not confirm any solid prior connection between Justine and Mark. There is a chance that Mark had seen Justine as she worked at her restaurant job, or perhaps as she got off the bus. And maybe Mark became obsessed, learning her patterns and abducting her in a well-planned attack. But of course, there is every chance that this was an essentially random event based on his dark urges. So why exactly did an apparent family man with a stable job turn into a complete monster? Why did Justine have to pay with her life for the wants of one man? Mark was in fact not doing as well as many people thought. His illicit substance use was spiraling out of control and his life was falling apart. His marriage to his wife Nicola was not going well. The couple were on the verge of separation despite their new family. Mark seemed to have completely signed off from the marriage. He was active on dating apps trying to pick up partners suited to his needs. His presence in the pub on the Saturday that Justine vanished was of no surprise either. He would regularly go out and attempt to pick up women in bars too. The exact reason for why he did what he did to Justine will never fully be understood.
She says, "Don't shoot me, I'm pregnant with a baby," and I shot her anyway.
Imagine returning to your safe haven after a day of working hard to find someone had entered your home without permission. Would you run? Would you comply with their requests? Or would you fight? I hope nobody watching this video ever has to find out the hard way, but this is what we're discussing in the highly controversial case of Thomas Greer. This will divide you. On May the 14th, 2014, Andrea Miller and Gus Adams were arrested at 8:25 p.m. on Main Avenue, Long Beach, California. Police had been investigating the extortion of an elderly man. The man was sat alone in a fast food restaurant in the Pacific Avenue and West Willow Street area. He was quietly eating his meal. The 28-year-old Andrea, visibly distressed, approached the lone senior. Andrea claimed she had been mugged and begged the man for money. The man, showing human decency and trust, gave Andrea around $30. Sensing that she could have found a new source of cash, Andrea convinced the man to give her his phone number. She now had almost unlimited access to the man, and she didn't wait around to take advantage of his kind nature. That very same day, she phoned him and swindled a further $300. And just the next day, Andrea contacted the man once more. Her new story was that her mother had just passed away. She asked the man for $22,000 to cover the funeral costs. Talk about an unlucky 24 hours. Mugged, and then this. The elderly man believed Andrea and wanted to help her out of this supposedly tragic situation. He wanted to give her the money. Andrea led the man to a bank, but the cashier was suspicious. Andrea didn't want a check made out to the funeral home. Instead, she wanted cold, hard cash. Luckily, the cashier refused to carry out this transaction. Not wanting to end what she saw as a good thing, Andrea came up with a new idea. She then took the man to a casino to withdraw the cash there there instead, believing that this would be a much easier way to do it without prying eyes. Andrea, though, behaved suspiciously in the casino. She tried to hide her face and stay out of the gaze of surveillance cameras. This behavior meant that when the man tried to withdraw the cash with his credit card, security denied their service. After an unsuccessful day, Andrea and the man parted ways. A neighbor of the elderly man was suspicious of what had been going on, and after confiding in him what had been happening, the man realized that everything Andrea had been asking of him was under false pretenses. A few days later, when Andrea once more contacted the man asking for money, this time he told her to come to his house to pick the money up. Andrea brought with her Gus Adams. The pair were unaware that this was a sting. Police were laying in wait and arrested the couple upon their arrival. The two were detained on suspicion of a number of felonies such as extortion, embezzlement, and receiving money under false pretenses. The evidence was insufficient at the time of arrest, according to a police spokesperson. Gus Adams was taken to the Los Angeles County Jail on an outstanding warrant for operating a vehicle with a suspended license, while Andrea Miller was released pending additional inquiry. According to police records, he was released from custody on May the 21st. Now, a different elderly man, 80-year-old Thomas Greer, was a Bixby Knolls, Long Beach resident who lived alone. He was what you might call old school. He kept large sums of money in his house, often $15,000 or $20,000, which he kept in his safe under lock and key. Thomas had had his house burgled between 2 and 4 times before, once when his estranged wife was home alone. A horrific thing to experience once, let alone on multiple occasions.
He's a nice old man. I remember the first break-in. They literally tore down the front door.
This led him to move the location of his safe key since it had previously been found and used. On July the 22nd, 2014, Thomas had been at work. He returned home at around 9 p.m. to something that must have felt like a nightmare. Upon opening his front door, he saw 2 people in his house. The pair claimed to be police officers in an attempt to subdue an obviously angry Thomas. But why would 2 undercover cops be trying to crack open a safe after breaking into a home? Remember, Thomas had been burglarized multiple times. His hunch was that it was by the same people each time, and that they would return in the future too. And since he had moved his safe key and hid it in a new location, these burglars would have had to have resorted to brute force. This is why when he entered his home, the door on his safe was already bent half open. These were not police officers. They were Gus and Andrea. A struggle quickly broke out between the three. Thomas was thrown to the ground in what was described as a body slam by 2 people just a third of his age. In doing so, his right collarbone was badly broken. Admitting defeat, Thomas told Andrea and Gus that to make their job easier, they should use a crowbar. He told Gus that he had one in his garage, so Gus left to get it. This now gave Thomas a little time to get to his feet, catch his breath, and gather his thoughts. Attempting to leave his home and escape the situation, Thomas went to his front entrance. However, this was blocked by a woman and a child asking to be let in. Thomas believed that the 2 were part of the gang that were currently inside his home, and he was right. The woman was Ruby Adams, Gus's mother and getaway driver. Thomas returned back into his house. An 80-year-old man trapped by 4 individuals in his own home. Pushed to his limit, he walked to his bedroom where he stored his firearm. Returning to the safe, Andrea and Gus had now bent the door open and retrieved the $5,000 that were inside. Upon seeing Thomas returning into the room, the pair attacked him once more, until, that is, they saw his gun. The pair now fled the scene out of the house, running to Gus's mother in a getaway car. Gus was fast enough to make it, but Andrea wasn't. Thomas raised his weapon. Andrea begged and pleaded with him. She shouted that she was pregnant, but Thomas pulled the trigger. Andrea was struck once in the knee and once in the chest. She fell down in the alley behind the house, got up once, and then fell once more, now no longer moving. Gus had at this stage escaped and was at his mother's car. Thomas went over to Andrea and grabbed hold of her body, dragging her back into his garage with a plan to lure Gus back. The plan worked to some degree. Gus did return, but rather than being an opportunity to exact revenge for Thomas, Gus attacked him once more, now stealing his firearm and his cell phone. Gus left Andrea on the garage floor and ran back to his mother's car, now fleeing the scene for good.
All of a sudden I hear these high-pitched gunshots and, I hear some screaming after that and I'm like, oh my gosh.
It'll only take a second. I shot 2 people last night.
You did?
Well, missed the man.
They run down, they drugged me and they run down the alley.
They ran down the alley. What happened to your shoulder, sir?
Well, I was where I fell. Anyway, we had cop cars all the way to the street and all the way down there. I walked in on them and they downed me. They jumped on me in the hallway. The lady didn't run fast as a man, so I shot her in the back twice. She's dead, and they told her off, but he got away. She says, "Don't shoot me, I'm pregnant with a baby," and I shot her anyway. She was dead. Well, yeah, I shot her twice, she best be dead. I shot her, so that's going to leave a message on his mind. When the time comes to defend yourself, you best do something.
How many total were there?
Well, there's probably 20, 25 policemen.
How about the intruders? How many?
Just 2.
Just 2?
Yeah.
Male and a female?
Yeah.
And so he took off running?
Yeah.
And she wasn't fast enough?
Yeah, so they crawled through my windows and stole my money out of my safe.
Oh my goodness.
I have a huge gun safe.
Yeah.
And he tore the front part off and reached in with his hand and grabbed the money.
So they didn't think you were home?
No.
Think carefully about the information that I've relayed when I read out the consequences for each individual involved. Following this event, Gus Adams was found guilty on August the 22nd of first-degree residential robbery, first-degree residential burglary, grand theft firearm and possession of a firearm by a felon. He was originally charged with murder due to the death of Andrea during their burglary, but he was subsequently acquitted. He was sentenced to 12 years in jail. Gus's mother, Ruby Adams, was sentenced to 3 years in jail for first-degree residential burglary. Andrea Miller paid with her life for her actions on that night in the home of Thomas Greer. During an autopsy, it was discovered that Andrea was in fact not pregnant. The actions of Thomas Greer were reviewed by the police. This was their findings. Thomas Greer is presumed to have held a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death or great bodily injury. This presumption, coupled with a careful review of the evidence presented, makes it clear that Thomas Greer exercised his legal and legitimate right of self-defense when he shot and killed Andrea Miller. No criminal liability arises from his actions. In life, sometimes we can do all the right things, but we're not rewarded for our actions, and sadly, sometimes we're even punished. It is hard to conjure up reasons for bad things happening to good people, and the actions of an evil few leave us scratching our heads, asking the question, why? This is the true story of Sasha Marsden. Sasha Marsden was a 16-year-old student seeking a career in childcare at the Field College. It takes a very specific kind of person to be drawn towards caring for children, one that is nurturing, patient, kind and empathetic. These are all words that can be easily used to describe Sasha. Sasha came from a loving family in Blackpool. She was born to Jane and Gary Marsden alongside sisters Gemma and Katie. Sasha was described as an attractive, bright young woman, someone with the prospects of a promising future ahead of her. Her older sister Gemma described her as cheeky and caring, saying that Sasha was attached to her all the time as Gemma's little sister. Unfortunately though, Sasha's past had changed her significantly. After experiencing an assault when she was just 14, the trauma she endured had caused her to struggle greatly as she aged. She frequently ran away and struggled in school, fighting to deal with the pain that she had endured, and the lack of accountability that her attacker had received. Despite these struggles, Sasha truly wanted to make a difference in the world, showing her true colours on her quest to become a caregiver and educator. This is why she enrolled in a failed college to make a better life for herself, refusing to let her assailant have any more power over her life. For those of you outside of the UK, Blackpool is a seaside town that acts as a famous vacation spot in Lancashire, England. It is the stag and hen party capital of the UK. In summer, it thrives on tourism. People love to visit its beautiful beaches, the tower, the zoo and the gardens, and it's even been voted as the UK's favourite seaside resort. But unfortunately, Blackpool is not only home to sunshine and smiles. In the winter, it cuts a starker shape. Sasha Marsden was hard at work on her college studies, managing her time enough to where she began looking for a job to make some extra money. Unfortunately for her, it was wintertime in a town that thrived on the summer sun. Businesses were slowing down and were reluctant to hire. Luckily though, she had met a man through a mutual friend, and he gave her the prospect of a job. The man was named David Minto. A 23-year-old barman and groundskeeper, Minto worked for the Grafton House Hotel. The hotel was a quaint getaway owned by Minto's girlfriend and her mother. Upon meeting with Sasha, he decided she would be perfect for the job. She could work for their hotel as a cleaner during the winter months. This is because his girlfriend Rachel would be away working at another job. Minto messaged her through Facebook. He was offering her the position and invited her to come over the following day so he could show her the ropes. Sasha excitedly agreed to the employment opportunity. It didn't seem too strange to Sasha when David Minto replied, "Will it just be you because I get a bit nervous around new people?" She calmed Minto's mind and made plans to visit the hotel the following day. David and Sasha had agreed that her first official day of work would be January the 31st. So on that day in 2013, Sasha's father, Gary, drove her to a shoe store near the Grafton House Hotel. Sasha told him that she would send him a message when she was ready to be picked up. Gary returned home to his wife and the family continued their day as normal. He was, however, prepared to pick up Sasha when they received her message. But by the time 8 PM rolled around, her parents became extremely worried. They'd called her and texted her to check on her status, but had heard nothing back. Instead of panicking, they decided to call Sasha's boyfriend, Danny. It was possible that he had gone to pick her up instead, but Danny hadn't seen or heard from her either. We can only imagine this causing an ominous feeling in the pit of their stomachs. Sasha's parents decided that they needed to find the hotel that Sasha was working at. Fortunately, boyfriend Danny knew Sasha's Facebook password, and this was a method of communication between Sasha and David Minto, the man who was now her boss. They quickly found the name of the hotel and hopped in the car to pay a visit. Upon arriving at the hotel, they walked inside to find David Minto at the front desk. Knowing that he was the man that hired Sasha, they asked him if Sasha was ready to come home yet. But to their surprise, David explained that Sasha had already gone home for the night. This was a great cause for concern. Sasha had no way of getting home without either her parents or Danny giving her a lift. Even though she had disappeared before in the past, things seemed different now. They thought that part of her life was over. Hours would go by without any news, and when 11 PM rolled around, Jane and Gary Marsden knew that something had to be wrong. It was time to report Sasha missing to the police. The investigators that spoke with Sasha's parents were diligent in taking down Sasha's description and last known whereabouts. When they had received the relevant information, including the fact that Sasha was working at the Grafton House Hotel, the investigators couldn't ignore the possible connection that Sasha could have to a case they'd received just hours earlier. A neighbour of the hotel had discovered a fire in the alleyway behind the Grafton House Hotel. This was after it caused his smoke alarms to go off. The neighbourhood recalled a man and woman coming out of the hotel to view the commotion, with the man saying that it was a mannequin that had been set ablaze. This man was David Minto and the woman was his girlfriend, Rachel Butterworth. During the neighbours' attempt to put out the fire, it had become increasingly clear that this was not a plastic person, but a real one. They were wrapped in rubbish bags, carpeting scraps, and bedding. There was no way to visually identify the body due to the state that it was found in. Police investigators had to find another way. Using Sasha's toothbrush, they were able to match her DNA to that of the body that had been found in the alleyway just hours before. She had been terribly assaulted, receiving 58 wounds to her neck and head made with a sharp implement. The only man that had any sort of connection to Sasha was David Minto, the man that had hired her. Because of this, David and girlfriend Rachel were both arrested for Sasha's attack. Before they questioned the two suspects, police had done a thorough investigation of the hotel and the alleyway. They had found a huge amount of Sasha's DNA, namely in the form of blood. Vital fluids were in the alleyway, hotel halls, and bathtub. DNA had also been found on a knife inside the hotel, one that would later be determined to be the sharp implement that was used in Sasha's attack. In addition to this, investigators found Sasha's clothes, purse, and phone inside the hotel. Upon questioning, Rachel denied knowing anything about the occurrences from that night. She said she had arrived at the hotel at around 9 p.m, smelling a strong odour of bleach in the air. David said that he had cut himself and got it on the carpet. He had then used bleach to clean it efficiently. Rachel had no clue that David was talking to Sasha, or that he had hired her or invited her to the hotel that day. In fact, David had no authority to employ anyone or pay them, having absolutely no say in the business or any access to the bank account. The police believed Rachel's story. They released her from custody and turned their focus to David Minto. The evidence against David was overwhelming, but his confession would seal it all in place. Despite the cards that were stacked against him, David aggressively denied any involvement in Sasha's passing. His story went as follows. Sasha had arrived at the hotel to complete her first day of cleaning. While she was there, she made aggressive, intimate advances towards him. This almost forced him into an intimately charged situation. He finally succumbed to her advances, and then he had consensual relations on the floor of one of the hotel rooms. He said that she suffered a nosebleed during the event. This is how he explained the red fluid they had found inside of the hotel. He stuck to the notion that this was the last time that he saw her, and at that time she was alive and well. Even though the investigators couldn't gain a confession, they still felt confident enough to charge David Minto with ferociously ending Sasha's life. Police described it as one of the most horrendous scenes they have ever investigated. As they prepared for the trial, the evidence against David only continued to accumulate. CCTV footage had shown Sasha entering the hotel along with David Minto, but she was never seen leaving. And even if she had left, why would she leave her clothes, her phone, and her purse behind? In addition, the investigators had gone through Sasha's phone. There they found two drafted but unsent text messages. The first was drafted at 4:58 and said, "Pick me up at Madame Tussauds. This is a wax figure museum nearby to the hotel." This message was sent to her boyfriend's father. This was unusual as Sasha was aware of the fact that he was currently out of town. The second, drafted at 4:59, was for Danny, which read, "I love you, tell Dad to pick me up from Madame Tussauds." This was equally as strange as there was no previous text messages between the couple. In fact, they almost never communicated through text messages at all. It was quickly deduced that Sasha did not write these messages at all. They had been written by her attacker. Not only was the hotel slow in the winter months, it was completely closed down for renovations. This meant that the fact that David even hired Sasha at all without the owner's knowledge was completely nonsensical and at the very least suspicious. On July the 15th, 2013, David Minto's trial began. The prosecution aggressively asserted their version of events. When Sasha rejected Minto's advances, he flew into a frenzied rage. He defiled Sasha's body and then started the fire. As for the defense, David's story had changed since his discussion with the police. His new story asserted that although they did have consensual relations at the hotel that night, that she had in fact passed away inside the hotel. After their intimate encounter in the hotel room, he said they had gone their separate ways. Sasha was to go home and David was to finish cleaning up. A short time later, David had discovered Sasha's body in a hotel corridor, saying he found her maimed and defiled from an attack by an anonymous intruder. And then, in a state of shock and confusion, he moved the body to the back alleyway behind the hotel. He did this because the sight of her made him queasy. The defense asserted that the real attacker was still out there roaming the streets, whilst the prosecution was pursuing an innocent bystander. The prosecution ignored these accusations, confidently presenting the overwhelming evidence against Minto, and hoping that this was enough. 11 days later, it was time for the jury to deliberate. It only took 3 hours for the members of the jury to arrive at a unanimous decision. They found David Minto guilty for everything he had done to Sasha Marsden. He was sentenced to a minimum of 35 years in prison, and the judge had plenty of choice words for him, saying that his deeds were ferocious and sustained, and that there was no sense of humanity within him. Sasha's family is doing everything in their power to ensure that David Minto never sees the light of day again. Sasha's sister Katie is ready to fight as hard as she can to make sure that Minto stays in prison forever, saying, "He will be 57 when he gets out. We believe he will do this to someone again. He's got no remorse and was not sorry in court. He took selfies on his phone while Sasha's body was there." Just a quick one. For some reason my videos are normally seen by just 1 to 2% of my subscribers. I actually don't know why. Regardless of the reasons, it's making it extremely challenging to keep this show on the road. And I promise I don't like to do this. It makes me feel like Oliver Twist or something. But please do consider becoming a channel member. There are currently 343 of you, and I'm aiming for the crazy goal of 1,000 by the end of 2026. You get things like early access to videos, our behind the scenes podcast, and of course my eternal gratitude. Thank you, and I love you all. Now back to the video.
I still can't believe it. I thought that I made progress, but obviously it didn't do nothing because hours later then this thing happened.
She's on foot somewhere in the area.
How did it feel?
When you did what you did, how did it feel?
I didn't kill anybody. It was disgusting.
Did it feel good?
It was disgusting. You guys really think I'm a murderer?
Isabella Guzman was born in Aurora, Colorado in June of 1995 to her parents Yunmi Hoy and Robert Guzman. When she was 4 years old, however, her parents got a divorce. Her mother would go on to marry a man named Ryan. As a child, Isabella struggled with some behavioral issues. Because of this, her mother sent her to live with her father when she was 7 years old. She moved back in with her mother and stepfather when she was a teenager. However, she would continue to struggle with these same behavioral issues. She then began getting into fistfights at school, her life seemingly spiraling downwards, before dropping out of high school during her senior year. In August of 2013, when Isabella was 18 years old, her relationship with her mother began to decline. At this point, Isabella became more threatening towards Yunmi. Isabella's stepfather claimed that her mother was extremely scared of her, and that she was exhausted trying to deal with Isabella's behavior. On August 27, 2013, Isabella and her mother got into one of their most heated arguments to date. This ended in Isabella spitting in her mother's face. The following day, Yunmi was at work when she received an email from Isabella. Although it was only a short message, it was a powerful and dangerous one. It read, "You will pay." This email made Isabella's mother feel so uneasy that she actually decided to call the police. The police visited the house and spoke with Isabella. They let her know that she was now an adult, saying that her mother could kick her out of the house at any point, and to avoid this she had to drastically alter her behaviour. Isabella did seem to be more calm after the police spoke to her, but Unhumane still felt uneasy about the situation, so she called Robert, Isabella's biological father, and asked him to come over and talk to Isabella as well. Robert and Isabella had a long conversation. He said that it seemed like Isabella had calmed down, and he believed that she understood exactly what he was telling her. He said that he felt like he had gotten through to her, and that she now wouldn't cause any more major problems like this one. The following day, August 28, 2013, Isabella's mother arrived home from work at around 9 p.m. She greeted her husband Ryan before heading upstairs to take a shower. This was her usual routine after work. Not long after Unhumane went upstairs, Ryan began hearing some strange noises. He heard some thuds and bangs coming from upstairs. These were followed by a scream. He rushed up to check on Unhumane, thinking she may have slipped in the shower, but that's not what he found. He noticed that Isabella was in the bathroom with her mother, but before he could enter, Isabella slammed the door shut and locked it. Ryan was pleading for Isabella to let him in. He was trying everything he could to get the door open, but Isabella was on the other side. She was pushing back against the door so that he couldn't get in. That's when Ryan noticed a pool of thick red fluid seeping out from under the bathroom door. At this point, Ryan ran downstairs to get his phone and call 911. After Ryan called 911, he ran back upstairs to the bathroom. He heard his wife say one final word, Jehovah. That was before Isabella opened the door to exit the bathroom. She was holding a sharp implement that was dripping with red vital fluids. Isabella walked right past her stepfather and looked straight ahead without saying a word. Ryan now rushed to his wife's side. She was laying on the bathroom floor, unclothed and covered in red fluid. There was a baseball bat in a similar state laying beside her. Ryan tried to perform CPR, but it was unsuccessful because of the terrible condition that Unhumane was in. Emergency services arrived just 11 minutes later. They discovered that Isabella had used a sharp kitchen implement to inflict injuries on her own mother approximately 79 times. Ryan told the police that it was Isabella who had committed the crime, but that she had then fled the scene and was now nowhere to be found.
District 1 is looking for Isabella Guzman. Looks like cut her mother's throat.
She's on foot somewhere in the area.
The female is going to be armed with a knife. She's an 18-year-old female. It says mixed race. I think it might be with Asian. She's wearing a pink tank top, shorts, one shoe.
Police began searching for Isabella, but the search didn't last long. Police got a call from someone who reported a body in a car. This was said to be situated in a parking garage less than a mile from Isabella's home. When police arrived, they found the car, but no body, though they did find other items that were related to Unhumane's murder in the car. Other officers found Isabella trying to leave the parking lot on foot. She was wearing the same red-soaked clothes that she wore during the attack. They arrested her in the spot, and she did not put up a fight.
You left her to die, brutally, on a bathroom
I did
floor.
not murder anyone. Please stop accusing me of this.
Just tell me how that feels.
Please fingerprint me, please fingerprint me, please fingerprint me. I will show you that I am not this freaky, horrible person. So she's 110 pounds? That's really skinny. I'm 148 pounds.
Isabella, please.
Don't call me Isabella. That's really
That's your name.
My name is not Isabella. My name is Samantha. There are people in this world who look alike, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You guys are not, like, all-knowing. You don't know everything. You're just accusing me of all this stuff that I didn't do.
We know what you know what you did, and we know who you are. We know how it happened,
Apparently not,
when it
because
happened.
you guys are completely wrong. You got the wrong girl.
No, we don't. We don't have the wrong girl, and you know that.
No, I don't.
How did it feel?
How did what feel?
When you did what you did, how did it feel?
I
Make you
didn't
feel
kill
good?
anybody. That's disgusting.
Did it feel good?
It's disgusting. You guys really think I'm a murderer?
Yeah, we're not joking.
Did it make you feel powerful?
I am not this girl. I don't know what happened with her and her life and who she is or what school she went to. That's not my problem. My problem right now is finding my boyfriend.
It's a funny game you're playing, but nobody's laughing. Do you think some juror sitting on a jury is going to believe that you're not the person we suspect killed their mother? When you're caught right down the street with knife injuries to your hand?
Scissors.
It's not scissor injuries.
I told you they were scissors.
It's not scissor injuries.
Yes, it was. You're not going to bully me into admitting what you want me to, like, pretend
No,
to be.
I suspect we're probably not. I mean, that's a decision you have to make in your own head. I mean, that's the bottom line. You're 18 years of age. You understand why you're here. You know what you've done. We've given you an opportunity to talk about what you've done. We've given you an opportunity to give us a reason why you did what you did. And you've continued on this crazy-ass story that this you have nothing to do with this, and that story is not believable. We don't believe it.
Doesn't have to be believable. It will be proven.
So-
I am not this Isabella girl. All this crazy fucking shit keeps happening, and I am not this girl.
Crazy fucking shit, that's a good way to put it.
How would you feel if this was done to you?
I'd be scared if I were you.
I'm not really scared. I'm just a little freaked out.
So you're not
all this
scared by
happening.
this?
No, because the DNA will not match.
Do you have no remorse for what you did?
I did not do anything wrong.
So you don't, do you?
I am not
You can
Isabella.
just sit there and continue to deny this with a clear conscience?
I am not Isabella.
Really? You can just sit here and completely deny all of this?
I'm not denying anything. I am being truthful.
That's you.
No, it is not.
There's no question. That's you.
She's pretty.
Yeah, you're a pretty girl. That's you.
But that's not me.
Yeah, that's up your Facebook account.
Isabella had her arraignment hearing on September the 5th. She had to be dragged out of her cell for this hearing. Once she got to the courtroom, she began looking straight at the camera and making strange faces such as smirking, sarcastic smiles, and pointing at her eyes. Isabella and her legal team decided to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. A mental health professional would testify on her behalf, claiming that Isabella was suffering from schizophrenia and that she had been experiencing delusions for years, delusions that worsened during the month before this attack. According to Isabella, she didn't even realize she was attacking her own mother. She thought instead she was attacking a woman named Cecilia in order to save the world. The judge accepted Isabella's plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Isabella was then sent to the Colorado Mental Health Institute. While she was in the psychiatric facility, the courtroom footage of Isabella making faces at the camera went viral on TikTok. Thousands of users posted videos of themselves recreating her facial expressions and her mannerisms. Many of them also felt sympathy for Isabella, saying that she was so beautiful and that she didn't deserve to go to prison. In November of 2020, Isabella filed a motion to the court to be released. She claimed that she was no longer a danger to herself or to others. In this petition, Isabella claimed that she was maltreated by her family for many, many years. However, she said that if she could go back and change what had happened, she would.
I was abused at home by my family for many years. My parents are Jehovah's Witnesses. And I left the religion when I was 14, and the abuse at home worsened after I quit. The fight with my mom was terrible, and I was injured in the process. I have the scars on my hands. I don't know if you can see or not. I'm not mentally ill anymore. I'm not a danger to myself or others. If I could change it, or if I could take it back, I would.
Her request was denied, and to this day, Isabella remains in the Colorado Mental Health Institute.
Losing a child is like carrying two stones in your pockets at all times. You get used to the weight, but the weight is there all the time.
Auburn, Alabama is a quintessential college town. There's lots of coffee shops and bars with live bands. Kind of cultural, but kind of cool. With a population of about 75,000, it has a small town feel. That is, even though it's the largest city in eastern Alabama and houses 30,000 students and staff at Auburn University. Auburn is a prestigious school, one of the South's largest universities. It was also Lauren Burke's dream school. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30th, 1989. She was born in Marietta, Georgia to parents Jim and Vivian. She was a happy girl who always looked on the bright side of life. It was said if you looked into her eyes, you just saw happiness. Along with her boyfriend Sean, she was in her first year at Auburn University. It was just 2 hours from her hometown, and it was the perfect school for someone planning a career in photography and marketing. She lived in an off-campus residence hall, and whilst at the university she became a member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She was doing college life right, and on the surface it looked like she was living the perfect life. Lauren was really just getting started. On March the 4th, 2008, 18-year-old Lauren began her day by having breakfast. She met with boyfriend Sean at the on-campus coffee shop. The couple were happy and carefree. They were chatting about upcoming assignments and their plans for their upcoming spring break. They both then set off for class. The semester was coming to an end, so both of their schedules were pretty light. At 11 AM when classes were over, Lauren called her dad and told him about her spring break plans. On that call, she also mentioned an upcoming dental appointment. She then went to Sean's dorm to take a nap. That was before an 8:30 PM study session at the library with her friend Michael. Everything seemed normal. It was just another day at college. At around 8 PM, Lauren left Sean's and walked to her black 2001 Honda Civic, a car that was parked near the back of a parking lot near his dorm. The library wasn't far and she knew Michael would be waiting for her. 8:30 PM came and went, and Lauren strangely did not show up at the library. Michael called Lauren to see where she was, but she didn't answer. Panic began to rise. Where was Lauren? After a few more frantic calls, Michael finally got a hold of her. She had forgotten about a birthday dinner for a friend, therefore she wouldn't make it to their study session. However, the call ended abruptly, kind of strangely. Michael then simply returned to his textbook. Reading and revision don't do themselves. At around 9 PM, 5 miles north of Auburn University, several motorists were driving along Highway 147. There, they saw a horrifying sight in the road. Near the left turn for Lee Road 72, there was a girl on the road. She was completely unclothed and crying. Her body was covered in road rash and she was waving her arms at them. The motorists stopped and blocked the traffic from both directions. When they got out of their vehicles, they found the girl lying on her back in the middle of the road. Red vital fluid was everywhere. She was taking deep, slow breaths and was gasping for air. The motorists called 911. A police unit rushed to the scene. They arrived there at 9:12 PM. But sadly, already, it seemed that it was too late. The girl in the road was unresponsive. They started CPR until EMS showed up and took over. However, the girl no longer had a pulse or a heartbeat. Emergency services all battled to bring her back to life. As she was rolled onto a backboard, EMS discovered a firearm wound to her upper back torso. She had been blasted in the back. She was then transported to the East Alabama Medical Center, but there, tragically, she was pronounced dead at 9:27 PM. Back at the university campus, officers were responding to a very different kind of incident. Lauren's black 2001 Honda Civic was engulfed in flames near Hinton Field. As crowds surrounded the burning car, responding officers tried to track down the owner, but they had no luck. The owner was nowhere to be found. They ran the license plate through the system and found out who the owner actually was. It was a man named Jim Burke. When they they finally got a hold of Jim, he explained the car was used by his daughter, Lauren, who was on campus. Officers told Jim that Lauren wasn't near her car. In fact, they weren't sure where she was at all. After hanging up, Jim called Lauren's mother, Vivian, to see if she had heard anything from Lauren. However, she hadn't. Vivian called around to see if anyone else had heard from Lauren, but no one else had either. Without thinking, Jim started driving towards Auburn. On the way, the Auburn Police Department Assistant Chief, Tommy Dawson, phoned Jim and asked him to drive towards a local hospital. A young woman, as we know, had been found on the highway. Officers needed him to confirm whether it was indeed the body of his daughter, Lauren. Father Jim said about this incident, she was lying on a gurney with a white sheet up to her neck, like she was sleeping like an angel. I looked at her. I said, "Oh my God." I kissed her forehead, and then I just left. An autopsy later concluded that Lauren suffered a single gunshot that entered her upper left back. It had punctured both lungs before exiting through her upper right arm. She had sadly bled to death within 2 or 3 minutes. But how did this happen? How did Lauren get to Highway 147 while her car was found burning on campus? Had she perhaps been abducted? If so, was she abducted on campus or off? What about this birthday dinner? There were so many questions and so few answers. Investigators searched through Lauren's burnt-out car. They were able to recover scraps of Lauren's burned clothing, along with a spent .38 caliber bullet. It appeared that whatever happened to Lauren had definitely taken place in her own car, which meant her car must have left the campus at some point. Investigators then searched the last place where Lauren had been seen alive, Sean's dorm. However, they came up empty. He himself had no idea what had happened to his girlfriend after she left his dorm for the study session with Michael. This obviously left investigators to speak with Michael. He told them about the strange abrupt phone call that he had with Lauren. He said it sounded like she was in a car during their conversation, which was confusing but now made more sense to him. While detectives were starting to put the puzzle pieces together, they still couldn't figure out who had abducted Lauren and why. 2 days later, on March the 6th, there were still no answers. But luckily, investigators soon had a strong lead. Whoever killed Lauren had also taken her debit card. And in this common, classic mistake, they used it in multiple locations on the night of her passing. At 9:17 p.m, just 5 minutes after police responded to the call about the motorists finding Lauren, her credit card was used to buy around $15 worth of gas at a station on the very same road where she had been found. Later, the card was again used to buy gas in Atlanta. And then groceries at a Kroger store in LaGrange, Georgia. Investigators were able to obtain a photo of a man using Lauren's card. They sent the photo off for enhancement in the hopes that they could identify this strange man. But before they could make an identification, the man struck again, this time in Newnan, Georgia. On March the 7th at about 9:55 a.m, Georgia police responded to a report of a possible carjacking in the parking lot of a Walmart on Bullsboro Drive. A man told officers that he was exiting his vehicle when he saw a man walking toward him with a gun. He quickly got back into his car and then watched as a man changed directions and approached an elderly woman who was getting into her car after exiting the store. The woman later said the man hit her in the back of the head, then stuck a firearm to the side of her head, and that he told her he was going to kill her and take her money and car. He shoved her into the passenger side floor and then took her wallet. He then got into the driver's seat and backed out of the parking lot in an attempt to leave. But the witness began to follow the man, which freaked him out. The assailant then jumped from the woman's car and got into a silver Chrysler. The witness called the police. Walmart loss prevention employees were able to provide officers with a tag number for the silver Chrysler. The tag on the vehicle was registered to a 23-year-old man named Courtney Lockhart. It gave an address in Smiths, Alabama. Approximately 30 minutes later, police issued a be on the lookout or BOLO for Courtney's vehicle. They received a call from Phoenix City, Alabama police. They had located him driving the silver Chrysler. He was speeding through a construction zone on Alabama Highway 80. Phoenix City motorcycle officer Williams pulled the Chrysler over. He asked Courtney to exit the vehicle, but he would not get out. When backup arrived, Courtney struggled with Williams, and then he managed to get back into the Chrysler and sped off. Williams and the other officers all raced after him. The chase reached speeds of 80 miles per hour. And Courtney even went off-road a couple of times. Eventually, Courtney got out of his car and began running. Then he was quickly apprehended by police. When officers patted him down, Courtney did not have any weapons, but he did have an iPod. After he was taken to the station, he was interviewed about the robbery and kidnapping that had occurred at Walmart earlier that day. Courtney then admitted to everything. When he was done confessing, investigators looked over the iPod that had been found on Courtney during his arrest. That iPod belonged to Lauren Burke. Auburn detectives were called in to interview Courtney about Lauren's murder. Surprisingly, he waived his rights and gave a full confession. Courtney told detectives he had no intent to end her life. He had only ever wanted to rob her. He explained that in the morning hours of March the 4th, he realized he needed gas for his car, which he was at that point living out of, but he didn't have any money. In his mind, this meant he would have to rob someone to fill up the tank. So he drove around the Auburn area all day looking for a victim. I don't mean to make light of this, but if I needed money for fuel, I would probably think of a more fuel-efficient way to do this, rather than driving around. But back to the case. In the evening hours, Courtney went to Auburn University campus and drove around there. After a while, he ended up stopping in a parking lot on top of a hill. He then watched as Lauren walked up to her car and slowly opened the driver's side door. Courtney then got out of his own car, firearm in hand, walked up behind Lauren, and told her to get into the car. Courtney said he shoved her in and she climbed into the passenger seat. He got in the driver's seat and asked how much money she had. He said Lauren didn't say anything at first. She just screamed. Courtney told investigators that he stayed calm, stating that he didn't say anything until she finally calmed herself down. Once she was no longer screaming, Lauren handed over $200 in cash and begged to leave. But Courtney didn't let her. Instead, he put the car in drive and took off. He made sure to keep his firearm pointed at Lauren at all times, while they sped north out of town. Bizarrely, Courtney said he told Lauren to take off her clothes. At first, she wouldn't do it, but eventually she did after he threatened her some more. And in a moment of real mental gymnastics, he explained that he did this not because he wanted to assault her, but because he thought she'd be less likely to escape if she was completely unclothed. As they drove, Lauren's study partner Michael started calling her. He was wondering where she was. After a few calls, Courtney told Lauren that she could answer the phone, but only if she made up an excuse for why she wasn't there. Lauren agreed. She finally answered the phone, and that's when she told Michael she had forgotten about a birthday dinner that had been arranged for a friend, and then she abruptly hung up. Courtney told investigators that as they drove away Highway 147 nearing Lee Road, he made a plan to turn around so they could head back to campus. But it was at this stage that the gun accidentally went off. He said they were both shocked and Lauren started screaming. And then he claimed she suddenly jumped out of the car of her own volition. Courtney said that he kept driving so that he could turn around at the next turnaround point. But there was already another truck turning around there. So he started heading straight back to campus. On the way back, he stopped and filled up Lauren's car with gas. He also splashed some petrol inside the car, then rolled the windows down so he wouldn't pass pass out from the fumes whilst driving back to campus. He parked Lauren's car in the same parking lot that he had abducted her from. He said that he took $46 of the $200 Lauren had offered him and then left the rest inside of the car. This could suggest that this was never really about the money. However, there was something in the car that took his fancy. He took Lauren's iPod and debit card and grabbed his gun. He left her keys in the ignition and her clothes inside the car. Courtney then set the car ablaze. He then left the campus and stopped to fill up his car with gas using Lauren's cash before leaving town. Now, Courtney was finished confessing, but investigators had a few doubts about his story. Why would he have forced Lauren to leave the campus with him if he only wanted to rob her? Why did he leave most of the money inside her car? It seemed more likely that he wanted to assault her, but he never got the chance to because she jumped out of the car. They also didn't believe Courtney's story that the gun accidentally went off. It would take way too much pressure to pull the trigger. It would take around 5 pounds of pressure if the hammer was cocked and 12 if it was not. Her injuries showed that the gun had been no more than a few inches away from Lauren when she was shot. For Courtney's story to be true, the gun would have had to have been much further away. 23-year-old Courtney Lockhart was charged with capital murder during the commission of robbery, capital murder during the commission of attempted violation, and capital murder during the commission of kidnapping. The prosecution sought the death penalty. Courtney pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. On November 8, 2010, Courtney's trial began in Lee County Circuit Court. The prosecution told the jury that Courtney kidnapped Lauren with the intent of robbing her and that he didn't accidentally kill her. He shot Lauren as she tried to escape, and then he left her for dead. Dr. Glenn King, a forensic psychologist for the prosecution, testified that Courtney Lockhart was absolutely not suffering from any kind of mental disease, nor any mental defect at the time he ended Lauren's life. Dr. King concluded that Courtney was not insane at the time of the murder because he engaged in a series of premeditated actions over a lengthy period of time that were all goal-directed towards the abduction. Courtney cased the area, destroyed the evidence, and fled the area. The defense, however, argued that the shooting was the irrational, unintentional act of a mentally unwell veteran who became impaired as a result of his service. Courtney had served in the army but had been discharged. The defense had multiple people, including Courtney's girlfriend, testify that after coming home from Iraq, he was withdrawn, paranoid, hypervigilant, and aggressive. On November the 18th, after deliberating for around 6 hours over a 2-day period, the jury found Courtney Lockhart guilty of capital murder during the course of a robbery and kidnapping. Jurors also decided on the penalty, whether Lockhart would serve life in prison without parole or be put to death. The jury unanimously recommended that Courtney be sentenced to life without parole. They could have recommended the death penalty, but they chose not to. Following the jury's decision, the judge said he needed some time to come up with a final sentence. Alabama is the only state that allows a judge to override a jury's decision regarding life or death sentences. On March 2nd, 2011, Courtney Lockhart's sentencing hearing was held. In the end, Judge Walker did not follow the jury's recommendation, and he sentenced Courtney Lockhart to the death penalty. In a vast 28-page single-space sentencing order, Judge Jacob Walker explained why he disagreed with the jury. He concluded that the kidnapping weighed heavily in favor of the death penalty, stating, "Lauren Burke was alone, unarmed, and she was chosen by Lockhart at random. The kidnapping is even more egregious because she was taken from a college campus, a place where students should feel safe, and was forced into her own car. Lockhart forced her to undress and held her at gunpoint in order to prevent her escape." The decision of the judge has been widely debated, and Courtney continues to appeal the judge's decision to override the jury. As of September 2022, Lockhart remains in the Holman Correctional Facility on death row.
Women influence influencers are also targeted, sometimes with fatal consequences.
Women who pursue any careers or hobbies as social media influencers should have the right to do so.
Justice for Sana Yusuf! Justice for Sana Yusuf!
In Pakistan, inside a modest house in Islamabad sector G13-1, Sana's aunt heard it first. A sharp crack, quick and muffled. For a second, she thought it was just a balloon popping. There were still balloons in the house, left over from a 17th birthday party that had just happened. Her mother, Farzana, was nearby. She heard the sound too, but what came next told her the celebration was truly over. She heard her daughter, Sana, fall to the floor. The mother rushed towards her daughter's room, and what she saw on the floor would stay burned into her memory forever. Sana, her clothes stained with red, her chest unmoving. Farzana screamed for help. Neighbors came running. Someone grabbed car keys. They tried to lift Sana to get her to the hospital, but by the time they carried her outside, it was already too late. Somewhere between that bedroom door and the front gate, her story had ended. The person who pulled the trigger was already gone. Who was he? Why had he done this? The hunt was on. What nobody knew in that moment was that what happened to Sana was about to rip open something much bigger. Just hours before the events of this video, Sana was celebrating. In her last video, she stands beneath pastel balloons cutting a cake. She's smiling the way that someone with the whole world ahead of them smiles. There were no shadows or dramatic warnings here, just joy, just life, a beautiful moment all round. And yet, by the very next day, that same video would be flooded with comments saying rest in peace. So how can things shift that fast? How did Sana go from blowing out candles to becoming the centre of a national tragedy and a national conversation? Police would later say that that answer starts long ago, and it starts inside a dark mind. Before the headlines, the outrage and the protests, Sana was just a girl from Chitral who filled her online world with colour, culture and kindness. Her family had spent years serving their community. Her father, Syed Yusuf Hassan, was known across Upper Chitral as someone that people went to when they needed help, when they needed guidance or they needed to feel hope. So Sana grew up watching that, and she carried that same softness into her life online. Her videos weren't scandalous, they weren't provocative, they were really just joyful. Chitrali dresses, northern folk music, girls' education, moments of laughter over shared cups of chai. But in reality, she gave even more than she showed online. If she had brand deals, she donated those clothes afterwards. The money that she received from ads, she spent it on girls who couldn't afford books or tuition. She didn't brag, she didn't document the good that she did. She simply just did it because she wanted to. For her family, Sana was preparing for medical school, a girl who wanted to heal people, not just to entertain them. But the morning after she met her end, the news broke like a thunderclap. And within minutes, the first theory spread like wildfire. People were saying, honor killing. People online didn't pause, they didn't ask questions. They just took a theory and they ran with it. A 17-year-old girl visible on TikTok. Her time ended in her own home. It seemed to fit a pattern that Pakistan knew too well. Hundreds of women are killed every year for honor, reportedly at least 405 in 2024 alone. This means there are countless women whose names never make the news. Comment sections exploded. Must have been the family. Her videos brought shame. These girls forget our values. This narrative swallowed Sana in seconds. Her kindness, her dreams, her gentleness, reduced to a stereotype that people were all too ready to believe. But here's where things turned. Here's where that narrative broke apart. Police began investigating. They spoke to the family. They examined the scene, and quietly, firmly, the truth emerged. This wasn't honor. This wasn't even her family. None of this was rooted in tradition or shame at all. It was something else entirely. The real threat was not from inside her home. It was outside, watching, waiting, and getting ready to step into her world. The first hint of danger didn't come from Sana, it came from him, a 22-year-old man living hours away in Faisalabad. He was unemployed, and he was quietly developing an obsession. Police say that he started trying to contact Sana months earlier. Messages, offers and attempts to meet up, repeated offers of friendship, each one just ignored, each one an obvious no. But here's where this story starts to twist. Because in his mind, no didn't mean stop. It seemed to mean try harder. Some people drift in and out of your DMs, they get bored, they move on. But not this man. He watched her videos constantly, he tracked her routines, he knew what city she lived in, he even knew her birthday, May 29th, a day that Sana spent surrounded by laughter, by that delicious looking cake, and by those amazing balloons. That strange man obviously wasn't invited to the party, but he still spent the day, travelling to Islamabad regardless. The next days were pretty quiet, at least that is from Sana's perspective. But for the man, his obsession was growing darker. It turned into entitlement, it turned into anger. By June the 2nd, he couldn't wait anymore, and he made his move. CCTV cameras later captured him wandering near her home. And this wasn't just once or twice, he did it for hours. Just a man pacing outside a house that didn't belong to him, looking for his moment to slip inside. The father of the house was out of the city, her brother was in Chitral, so only the women were home. The man did not knock, he didn't message to be let in. Instead, he forced his way into the home, straight into a home that had never invited him. And this was a moment where everything pivoted, the point where obsession stopped being digital, and it now became physical. When that man stepped through the door, he wasn't there to talk. He had already made up his mind about how this story was going to end. When the man crossed the threshold of the family home, the world outside kept on moving. Cars passing, neighbours cooking dinner, the evening settling in like on any other day. Inside that house though, time went into overdrive. It was a normal afternoon with nothing out of place. Then, Sana saw him, standing in her bedroom. A man that she had never welcomed in, now standing inside her home, inside her room, blocking the doorway, holding a pistol. Her mother heard the commotion, footsteps, a voice that she didn't recognize, a tone that didn't belong in their home. There was a brief confrontation, a moment where Sana tried to understand what was happening, a moment where this man could have turned around. He could have stopped, he could have left, but he chose not to. Police later said he pulled the trigger twice, both hitting Sana in the chest, close range and final. The same aunt who thought she'd heard a balloon popping now understood what that sound really was. She rushed towards the noise, but then the intruder turned the weapon on her too. He pulled the trigger once more, but this time the weapon jammed. A mechanical failure that saved her life. For a split second, that malfunction created a moment of strange silence, and it was just long enough for the man to flee. He didn't run away in blind panic. Instead, he walked out calmly with purpose, and he took something with him that was not his. Sana's phone, the device that he believed held conversations, messages, anything that he thought could twist this into a different story. He believed that deleting those traces might erase his role. It might change the narrative. It might hide his obsession. But nothing he did could undo what was already done. Back inside the home, Sana's mother was collapsing over her daughter. She was shouting her name, calling for help, calling for someone, anyone to bring her back. Neighbours carried Sana to a car. They tried to rush her to the hospital, but she was gone before they made it. By the time her father got the call, nothing in his life would ever be the same. Outside, the street was filling with sirens, neighbours whispering, people staring into a home that had just been full of birthday balloons hours earlier. And this story that would shake Pakistan was only just beginning. The moment that news of Sana's passing hit social media, the story exploded. Comments poured in fast. Shock spread across Pakistan, from influencers to students, from families who saw their own daughters in Sana. But while the country was grieving, the police were racing for answers. The Inspector General called it a blind case, saying that there were no clear leads, no known suspects, just a teenager gone and a man who had vanished into the city. So investigators began digging hard. They combed through 113 CCTV cameras, footage from streets, businesses, highways, tracing through every movement, and slowly, pixel by pixel, a figure began to appear, a man walking away from the house, then boarding transport, then leaving Islamabad. Less than 24 hours after the event, they found the man in Faisalabad. There, he had tried to disappear back into his old life. When the man was arrested, he confessed for what he'd done to Sana. This confession will become important later. The man was now in custody. Police recovered the weapon. They recovered Sana's phone. They recovered messages that he had erased, evidence he tried to destroy, and a timeline that he thought he could blur. Things online were heating up. Millions of strangers were choosing sides, some demanding justice, others blaming Sana for her own demise. In the days after Sana met her end, the streets of Islamabad filled with anger and grief. Activists, students, women and families all gathered outside the National Press Club, holding signs that read, "Saying no is my right," and "Women are not targets." Chants rose up against patriarchal violence and the culture of blaming victims. For many, Sana's passing wasn't just another case. This was the final breaking point. In a country where women are too often punished simply for being visible, the protest demanded immediate justice, systemic reform, and safety for every woman who dares to exist online. For days, the man in this story was simply a silhouette, a figure in CCTV clips, a presence pacing outside a house that wasn't his, an evil presence who pulled a trigger and then disappeared. But now we know more about him, and the truth about their so-called history, a history that wasn't a love story, it wasn't a friendship, it wasn't even a misunderstanding. It was something far more disturbing than all of that. Police say that the man had tried to contact Sana repeatedly, that he tried online, through messages, and then finally in person. He'd watched her videos obsessively. He'd learnt her routines. He travelled all the way from Faisalabad to Islamabad just to try and get close to her. When he learned her birthday was May the 29th, he made the trip early, hoping that she would meet him. She didn't. Obviously, why would she want to spend time with him rather than her family? And here's the part that Sana's family stresses. Sana never told them about him. She never mentioned any messages. She never reported being harassed. To her, he was just a stranger, totally unimportant, and nobody in her life. To him, though, she was something he believed that he was owed. Because remember, this was never a relationship. This wasn't reciprocated. This wasn't two people who knew each other. It was a physical embodiment of entitlement, which is so often violence. The man who did this was named Umar Hayat. He was 22 years old. After the arrest, the case moved quickly, at least on paper. Umar Hayat was placed on a 14-day physical remand. Police lined up the timeline, the weapon, the CCTV footage and the recovered phone. And then came the identification parade. Sana's mother and aunt, the two women who had seen him inside their house, had to stand face to face with the man who had just shattered their lives. They could identify him immediately. From there, the court extended his remand and then shifted him into judicial custody. Trial dates formed, statements were recorded, the paperwork stacked higher and higher. But then something happened that stunned the public. Despite previously confessing to the police at the time of his arrest, despite the recovery of the phone, despite eyewitnesses, Umar now stood in court and said, "All accusations are false, a not guilty plea." I don't know about you, but I see this as an extension of his entitled behaviour. The judge adjourned the hearing. More witnesses scheduled, more dates marked, more waiting. And while the legal process crawled forwards, Sana's parents could hold on to the only thing they had left, their daughter's memory. Their lives were now being swallowed up by a system that they hoped wouldn't fail her. But justice in cases like this is never quick, it's never simple. and importantly, it's never guaranteed. The case continues moving through the courts, and all eyes are watching at what happens next. Because what happens to Umar Hayat will echo far beyond Sana's family. It will speak to the whole of Pakistan, and whether the justice system is actually up to protecting girls like Sana, girls that will never get to grow up. In the days after Sana met her end, her bedroom stays the same. But now there's two main differences. Sana isn't there anymore, and there are bullet holes in the walls. Her final birthday cake, pink and soft, is still sat in her feed, frozen in a magical moment where nothing was wrong. And also often that's the part that people forget. Sana isn't simply a headline. She shouldn't just be seen as a symbol or as a topic of debate. She was a young woman who wanted to study medicine, to help other girls, to celebrate her culture, and to make videos that just made people smile. Her father said that she was braver than a son. Her mother still calls her name when the house feels too quiet. The events of this video expose a truth that many already knew, but still hoped wasn't real. And that truth is that we live in a world where women and girls can be punished just for saying no. Some young souls are born to be free, much like a wild bird held captive in a cage. Even if you love them, if you want what's best for them, you will have to let them go. But what if the captor refuses to do so? They could either hold on to them, or make sure nobody else could have them. This is the infuriating case of Zuzu Verk. Just like small towns all across America, Alpine, Texas is known for its peace and tranquility. With a population of just over 5,000 people and its geographic location within the world's largest dark sky reservation, Alpine is a perfect destination for those wishing to lay back, relax, and gaze upon the wonders of the universe on a calm, clear night. It was the beautiful terrain and wildlife that drew 21-year-old Zuzu Verk to the small West Texas town, words she had written herself. Named after the character Zuzu Bailey from the timeless Christmas movie It's a Wonderful Life, Zuzu Verk was every bit as whimsical and free-spirited as her namesake, with a personality that fills the room. By the way, I absolutely love this name. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. A biology major at Sul Ross State University at the time of her disappearance, Zuzu was born on April 22, 1995 to Glenn and Lori Verk in Keller, Texas. After graduating from Timber Creek High School in her native Keller, Zuzu moved to Alpine during the 2014-2015 school year. Zuzu was kind of quirky and artsy and a lover of the outdoors. She became an unofficial daughter to the community, Lori Verk said in a statement to one news outlet. She was described by one friend as comforting. Zuzu always knew the right things to say. She could cheer anyone up. Another acquaintance called her a sassy star child who made Alpine home for me. Zuzu was well known in her adopted hometown of Alpine, where she lived with her brother Miles. He himself mentioned that she was the best sister you could ever have. Whilst a student at Sul Ross, Zuzu worked with the Borderlands Research Institute and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. For her outstanding efforts while attending the university, Zuzu was named on the Dean's List. Independent and outgoing, Zuzu had applied for a transfer to Texas A&M University on the very week that she vanished, hoping to continue her studies and eventually move on to Japan. While in Alpine, Zuzu had met a man named Robert Fabian. 4 years her senior, by all accounts, Robert was deeply in love with Zuzu. In fact, according to Miles Zerk, he had thought that Robert loved her more than she loved him. But he was also known to be extremely jealous and was described by one peer as being all consumed by the thought of Zuzu leaving the Alpine area. Robert was described by Zuzu's mother Lori as being tall, dark and handsome, but with an attitude, saying he was arrogant, manipulative and all about Robert. Mother Lori last spoke with Zuzu on October the 10th, 2016. Zuzu told her mother that she was planning to tell Robert about her plans to transfer to Texas A&M, approximately 500 miles away from Alpine, which would be a final way of breaking off the on-again, off-again relationship. But several days went by without any contact from Zuzu to Lori, something one of Zuzu's best friends, Adriana Doggett, would call shocking. The family were normally very close. The distraught mother went so far as to text Zuzu saying, "Please tell us you're alive," as more and more time passed since she had been in touch with her daughter. In a desperate attempt to locate her child, Lori contacted Robert, who claimed he was giving her space and had not seen her. But after her urging, he finally contacted police to perform a welfare check on the young student. However, Robert failed to mention that he had dinner with Zuzu to her mother before she vanished. But after being told about the dinner by Zuzu's friend, Lori Verk found this to be very suspicious. So when Zuzu Verk was officially reported missing on October the 4th, 2016, it was not a matter of if but when her boyfriend Robert Fabian would become a person of interest in this case. Officials and community members began a series of searches for the missing girl. However, one resident who was notably absent was boyfriend Robert Fabian. Robert now told investigators that on the evening in question, he had invited Zuzu over for a romantic dinner date. They shared a meal and some champagne, but when Robert mentioned his ex-girlfriend in conversation, he claimed Zuzu became angry and left his apartment somewhere around 2 to 3 a.m. He then told the interviewing officer, Captain Daryl Lasoya, that when Zuzu had stopped responding to his messages, he simply assumed she needed space. Until he received a distraught text message from Lori indicating she hadn't been able to contact her daughter either. Robert told the officer that Zuzu wanted to continue on a friends with benefits type relationship rather than anything serious, and he characterized their relationship as a roller coaster. When police questioned Robert's downstairs neighbor, John Franco, he indicated to them that he had seen Robert leave the building at around 4 a.m. alone, and that Zuzu's car was still in the parking lot well into the morning when he left for work after 10 a.m.
You can hear him moving or stuff around, playing music, and then she shows up, they make dinner like at 9, 10, you can smell their food, and you can hear them conversation and then laugh a little bit, and then it got quiet like after 11. We just heard one shut the F up. And that was it.
Neighbour Franco also told police that he could hear arguing, along with what he could only describe as unique noises coming from Robert's bedroom. During a second interview with Captain Lasoya, when notified of what his neighbour had told investigators, Robert recanted part of his previous statement. He now told police that after the argument he had left and gone for a drive, and when he returned to the apartment, Zuzu was still there, and only then left some time after. The police captain made it clear during the interview that he was suspicious of Robert, saying, "You know, I think you're leaving some stuff out." Robert would then consent to a search of his apartment, which turned up a mattress pad and some clothes in the building's laundry, everything stained by bleach. Oddly enough, his bed had been stripped bare with not even a pillowcase left. While interviewing Robert, investigators noted he always spoke of his girlfriend in the past tense, as if he was already aware of what gruesome fate had befallen her. Within 2 weeks of Zuzu Verk being reported missing and the suspicious circumstances piling up against him, investigators named Robert Fabian as a suspect in the disappearance of his girlfriend in a news release on Facebook. The same release also named Robert's best friend, Chris Estrada, as a person of interest. Estrada had known Robert since high school, and the two were in contact often. Phone records indicated that on the morning of October the 12th, Estrada received a call from Robert at 3:15 a.m. Estrada initially tells investigators that he picked Robert up at his sister's later that day to hang out and go to dinner. When he picked up Robert, he claimed his sister asked him to drive him to the Dollar General and to loan him his credit card as he had forgotten his at home. At the dollar store, Robert purchased some plastic painter's drop cloths, which Estrada claimed were used when he helped Robert paint a table at his apartment later that evening. But a statement from Robert's friend, Brittany Gasker, painted a completely different picture. She said Chris Estrada came to her home shortly after he had left Robert Fabian around 12 a.m. on October the 13th. She described him as looking like he'd seen a ghost, and not himself. After asking her friend what was wrong, Chris replied, "I don't want to get you involved. Just don't ask me any questions." Brittany was not aware that Chris had been with Robert earlier that night, and it wasn't until about 5 days later that she learned of Zuzu's disappearance. After speaking to a mutual friend, Josh Kobos, who himself had an eerie conversation with Robert, they both decided they should contact the police to give a statement. Throughout the weeks and months following the disappearance of Zuzu, her family held several press conferences urging the community to not give up searching for their daughter, and even going so far as to make a public plea directly to Robert Fabian to cooperate with the authorities, saying, "Robert, if you love Zuzu, you will come down here and you will help the police bring my sister home," Miles Verk said in a press conference later that October. But as days turned into weeks, and though the police believed they had their suspect, there were simply no more leads to follow and the investigation slowed to a halt. "We didn't hear anything for so long, we all just figured she had passed away," stated Bo Marcotte, a fellow student at Sul Ross State University. That is until February the 3rd, 2017, when a Border Patrol agent named Jared Maynard stumbled upon a ditch in the desert containing human remains. The remains were exhumed and positively identified to be those of Zuzu Verk, wrapped in what appeared to be a plastic painter's drop cloth, much like the ones purchased by Robert Fabian at the Dollar General the day before Zuzu was reportedly last seen. It took investigators less than 24 hours to arrest Robert Fabian and to charge him with tampering with evidence in concealing a human corpse. Chris Estrada was arrested 2 days later in Arizona, charged with the same felony. Chris pled no contest to charges of tampering with evidence in April 2018, with prosecutors recommending leniency for his crimes. Estrada agreed to testify against his best friend, Robert Fabian, a best friend who was now being charged with the first-degree murder of Zuzu Verk.
Lori Verk tells me she's not surprised by Robert's indictment, but rather relieved.
That's what we've thought all along, and I'm very grateful for the grand jury. They've been working on this long and hard, too.
And now she's finally seeing the first steps of justice being served against the man she believes was behind her daughter's disappearance.
This is an opportunity for you to just talk. Zuzu's parents are right here. They just want to know if you have anything to do with it.
The trial began the first week of May 2019. After the initial proceedings, the first 2 days of testimony were largely various witnesses. They included Zuzu and Robert's family and friends recounting their statements to police during their initial investigation. The defense team for Robert Fabian maintained that neither his fingerprints nor DNA were found on any incriminating evidence connecting him to Zuzu's death, and that any evidence presented thus far was purely circumstantial. On the third day of the trial, Chris Estrada was called to testify.
They believe I helped, a cover-up.
And did you?
No. Just hung out and had some drinks. To me, it was a normal day, and I guess now it never will be.
He claimed that his initial recollection of events to investigators was true. However, when the pair returned to Fabian's apartment after dinner, Robert told Chris he needed to speak to him about a life or death matter. According to Chris, Robert explained to him that the dinner had gone well, but at some point things had gotten physical. He said Robert described having his hands around Zuzu's throat when she started to hyperventilate and stopped breathing. At that point, he said he attempted to perform CPR on his girlfriend but could not revive her. She was gone, Robert told his friend, and her body was still laying under the covers in his bedroom. After the confession, Estrada said Robert asked him to help move Zuzu's body from his apartment. According to Estrada, it was then he became worried and left, ending up at another friend's house. After visiting her, he went home and fell asleep. Chris then explained that Robert asked him for assistance in moving the body a second time, saying that he just wanted to get her out. He also asked his friend not to report him to law enforcement. Chris Estrada then testified that although he declined to help his friend move Zuzu's body, he told him that he wouldn't report the crime to the authorities. When asked why he chose not to turn in his friend, Estrada replied, "It was a difficult decision, but at the time, that is what I chose. Today, it would be different. Although commenting on his change of heart and decision to testify, Estrada stated, "At some point, I decided everyone needed some closure." Perhaps as shocking as a testimony of Chris Estrada was that of Roy Roman. He had been Robert's cellmate during his time at Brewster County Jail. Roman claimed that Fabian had explained to him that Zuzu had found out about a bisexual relationship between himself and Chris Estrada, and she was threatening to expose it. At that point, he said Robert told him anger took over. He also told the court that at night he could hear Robert weeping, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you." Ultimately, Robert Fabian was found guilty of the murder of Zuzu Verk by a jury of his peers. He was sentenced to life in prison for the murder, plus 20 years for the charge of tampering with evidence. For his testimony, which led the way in securing a conviction, Chris Estrada received a sentence of 42 months plus costs on the charges of tampering with evidence. Robert Fabian afterwards appealed the ruling, stating he received ineffective assistance of counsel, and that the court erred in allowing accomplice witness and jailhouse informant to testify in the trial, among other technicalities. A judge ruled that the guilty verdict in the original case should be upheld, and that all evidence in the case was sufficiently corroborated. Robert Fabian is currently incarcerated in the state of Texas penal system. Therese Johansson Rojo was born on June 17, 1993 in Sweden. As a teenager, she found herself entangled in a web of toxic relationships. She was known for her outgoing and cheerful personality. She lived in a town called Stureby, and she documented her life in a personal blog. This blog made her quite popular among her friends. This popularity also attracted the attention of 16-year-old Tim Vreged. On May 13, 2009, however, her name became a source of contention. In her circle of friends, rumours swirled that she had shared a kiss with Tim on May 2, 2009. However, Tim was already in a relationship with 16-year-old Tove Lind. According to some friends of Tim and Tove, Tove was the one pulling the strings in their relationship. She was known to be very controlling and did not let her boyfriend spend time with others. One of Tim's friends said that since the two started dating, he never really got the chance to meet up with his old friends anymore. The conflict between the couple reached its peak as Tove, driven by jealousy and anger, confronted Tim at his school. This resulted in an argument that grew physical, and Tim was left injured. Their relationship, which began in 2007 when they were just 15, had always been tumultuous with infidelity on both sides. They were both involved in a local church, but their behaviour didn't necessarily reflect those values. Tove's overbearing nature strained Tim's relationship with his friends. Therese, who had recently ended her relationship with a guy called Gordon, was actually linked to the couple's turmoil by mistake. It seems that kiss had never actually happened. During the Swedish tradition of Valpurgis night, a celebration of spring's arrival, Therese and her friends threw a party in the woods on May 1st, 2009. It was here that Tim and Therese shared their first kiss, and this was when the real troubles truly began. Little did Tove know that this was the fourth time that Tim had betrayed her trust, and the truth came to light around 2 weeks later on May 12th. This was the day after Tove's birthday. At first, Tim denied his actions, but he later confessed through a text message. This was sent on May 13th at 10:41 p.m. In a desperate attempt to reach Tove, he made 16 calls, leaving voicemails, and even sent her an email. He was expressing his deepest remorse and longing to make amends and get back together. The email translated read as, "I feel so awful right now. I don't know what to do. You have no idea how much I miss you. I mean it when I say I would kill someone. If you were to leave me right now, I would die. I love you above all else. I need you back in my life because you are the kindest, most amazing person in the world." The exchange continued with Tim and Tove texting each other during class. Tim was begging to meet her in person. Tove's response was harsh, but maybe rightly so. She was filled with anger and resentment. She questioned his worth and his loyalty, trying to use her words to injure his self-esteem. She said, "Don't forget, you're worthless. Worthless. Nobody likes you. You pig. You effing pig. And why don't you answer, you effing creep? I have an idea. Next time you're gonna cheat, why don't you pick up Linda? You're both ugly and disgusting. Smiley face." Tove wrote. Their teenage relationship had reached a breaking point, teetering on the edge of pure hatred. But as time passed, Tove managed to regain some composure. She began expressing her feelings more clearly, saying, "You just care about yourself, and you never keep your promises. Sorry, but I just don't trust you." During this period, Tim persistently contacted her multiple times a day. He gave the impression to their friends that they were going to get back together. However, behind the scenes, a much darker plot was beginning to unfold. These dark conversations began around May the 15th and extended until May the 23rd. Tove, in her deep anger and pain, demanded something horrifying from Tim. She wanted him to take Therese's life, the girl with whom he had cheated. Tim had previously said he would do anything to prove his love, and this included taking a life. Tove made it clear that unless he did what she asked, there was no chance of them ever getting back together. On May the 26th, Tim left his house to confront Therese. He reached her address via the metro after looking it up online. Whilst waiting for Therese to return home, he continuously called and texted Tove. His true intentions at this time were still unclear. His initial plan was to catch Therese outside her home, but he had no real concrete strategy. Panic set in when Tove stopped responding to his calls and texts. Tim grew more desperate. He wrote, "I'm panicking. Please just answer me and I'll stay until she gets here. I can't do it otherwise." Tove promised to call soon, but never did. Tim eventually stopped calling after 9 unsuccessful attempts. The following morning at 8:30 a.m., Tove sent a message to Tim and confessed. "I'm sitting next to her on the subway. I just can't take it any longer. She has to die." In response, Tim agreed to do what she wanted, and that same day he made his way to Therese's house once more. However, Therese was nowhere to be found. At this time, she was at her friend Ina's house. However, Tim had no way of knowing this and had no idea where she could be. Since Tove had once again not responded after 8 attempts, Tim once more abandoned the plan. Unbeknownst to Therese, her life was in grave danger. She carried on with her normal life. She went about arranging her prom and updating her blog readers about her new outfits. Her parents asked about her prom date and she mentioned her friend, Daniel. But her true wish was to reconcile with her ex, Gordon, and go to the prom with him instead. That night, Tim told his new plan to Tove through a text message. It detailed a horrifying scheme. He wanted to lure Therese to search for a hidden bottle of vodka, and then when they were alone and she was vulnerable, the attack would take place. However, it seemed that Tove was still ignoring his texts. This left a sense of foreboding and tension hanging in the air. Tim seemed to be growing more and more desperate. On the following morning at around 8 a.m, as Therese was on her way to catch the bus, Tim emerged from hiding among some bushes. He made up a lie about owing some people some money and being late in repaying them, so therefore he needed to retrieve a bottle of vodka that he had previously hidden in the underbush as a substitute for the money. Tim asked Therese for her help in finding it and they ventured into the bushes together. However, this plan was interrupted when Therese's friend Ina called out to her from the nearby bus stop. She warned that they needed to board the bus immediately if they did not want to be late for school. Unable to help Tim any further, Therese rushed to catch her bus. But the weight of her decision weighed heavily on her throughout the day. Meanwhile, Tove and her family were away on a weekend trip to Paris on May the 29th. Tove told Tim that she no longer trusted him. She now insisted that she do the deed before she came back. In response, Tim shared details of his weekend plans. However, he now made no mention of intentions to harm Therese. As Tove asked him whether he had done it, Tim responded that he hadn't found the opportunity to do so yet. On June the 1st, Tove messaged Tim again, impatient and angry. She asked him why he hadn't been in touch as promised and if he had done it. Her frustration and hatred poured out through her messages. She accused him of being untrustworthy. She even implied that he was with Therese at that very moment. To her surprise, the response she received was not from Tim, but from someone else. Tim left his cell phone at my house. This is Ola. Tim had left his phone at his friend Ola's house. Intrigued by the content of their text conversation, Ola chose to read it. He found the messages unsettling enough to jot them down in a notebook. He later shared this text conversation with his brother Max, and the two of them discussed it privately. However, they chose not to disclose these details to anyone else. The plan was hidden in plain sight and now known to 4 people. On the evening of June the 2nd at 9:10 p.m, Tove texted Tim, giving him an ultimatum. She said if he hadn't carried out you-know-what within the next 2 hours, that their relationship was officially over. Tim begged for more time, asking for an alternative method to prove his commitment. Tove was growing more reluctant and skeptical, but Tim assured her he would carry out the plan in time for the prom. However, at 12:18 a.m. on June the 2nd, Tove sent her final message to Tim. The message read, "Until you do it, we are nothing." And after that, she stopped all communication with Tim. On the evening of June the 6th at 7 p.m, Tim, Max and Ola gathered at Tim's friend Dennis's house to watch some football. The 2009 graduating class with over 100 students had planned a celebration later that evening at Hopbacken. This was a large forested hill that had once been used for ski jumping contests. At 7:16 p.m, Tim sent Tove a text message saying, "I'll do it then if she is there tonight. Otherwise, I'll find out where she is. I'll see you later. Kisses." Tove once again did not respond. Around 9 p.m, Therese along with her friends Ina and Felicia arrived at Hopbacken. She brought a bottle of Magic Crystal vodka with her, and although she initially seemed to be acting normally, chatting and enjoying herself, the effects of the vodka left her feeling dizzy. Tim, who had just arrived with Dennis and Max, chose not to drink and appeared to be in a foul mood. While sitting on a rock on the opposite side of the glade, he made a comment about Therese, mumbling to Dennis, "I want to punch her in the face to remove her makeup, so that everyone can see how ugly she is." At 10:29 p.m, Tim sent a text message to Tove. It said that he was going to send her a message as soon as it was done. He told her not to turn off her phone and to call him immediately. Tove once again did not respond to his message. However, half an hour later, she too arrived at Hopbacken with friends Olivia, Gordon, Rasmus and Daniel. Tim pulled her aside for a brief conversation. This conversation left Tove feeling disturbed. Following their discussion, she and Olivia decided to leave Hopbacken and head towards Olivia's home for a sleepover via the metro. This meant that they avoided the unfolding events at the forested hill. At around midnight, Therese told her friends that she needed to use the restroom. She then headed off into the forest. Unbeknownst to her, Tim also left the gathering and ventured into the woods. However, Tim left in a different direction, but he then circled back, trying to find Therese. After a few minutes of searching in the darkness, he saw her beneath a cliff. He told her that he needed to speak with her. Still under the influence of alcohol, Therese sat down on a rock. Tim then picked up a log and struck her on the side of the head. However, this rotting log broke easily, splintering into soft pieces. As Therese attempted to rise to her feet, she cried out, yelling, "What are you doing?" Tim, however, forced her to the ground. There he lay on top of her and wrapped his arm around her neck. This created a form of chokehold. Despite her struggling, he tightened his grip on her neck. Eventually, she was left unconscious. However, Therese was still breathing, so he now looked for a stick in the dark and used it to press down on her neck, crushing her windpipe. After several minutes of applying pressure, he let go, although he still couldn't be sure that she had truly stopped breathing. To confirm, he kicked her in the stomach twice to see if she would react, but she didn't. After this, he fled the forest and returned home, leaving behind a horrific and tragic scene. The disappearance of Therese deeply worried her friends, and when she failed to return after heading into the forest, they began searching for her. Ina and Therese, who were having a sleepover, were to be picked up by Ina's mother, so it was unusual for Therese to leave without informing anyone and leaving her purse behind. Her friends then spent 45 minutes walking through the woods, calling her name, but they couldn't find her. They then reached out to Tim and Tove through calls and text messages, desperately hoping to find Therese alive and well. After another 10 minutes of fruitless searching, the friends decided to call the police. And that is when Daniel, Rasmus and Gordon made the grim discovery of Therese's lifeless body in the bushes near a trail. They called out to the others. Everyone rushed to the scene. Max's parents, who lived nearby, called 911 and arrived at the location. CPR was performed in a desperate attempt to bring Therese back to life. However, this was far too late. On Saturday, June the 7th at 6:15 a.m, Tim was arrested at his home. Tove was also taken into custody at around 9:30 a.m. from Olivia's residence. At first, both denied any involvement in the murder. However, on June the 10th, Tim confessed to his priest that he was the one who had taken Therese's life. He said that Tove had told him to do it, and the police discovered text messages that supported his claim. During questioning, Tove said that she never had any genuine intention for Tim to kill Therese. Her motive was to end the relationship, saying that Tim would not accept a simple breakup. In an attempt to save herself, she devised what she believed was an impossible challenge for Tim. Driven by their Christian upbringing, she couldn't fathom that Tim would actually commit a murder. Her plan was that, when he eventually failed, that she would finally be free from him. However, the judge did not accept her explanation. Tove was sentenced to 4 years in a juvenile jail for soliciting murder. Tim, on the other hand, was found guilty of murder. He received a 4-year sentence in a juvenile correctional facility. Both teenagers were expected to be released in the summer of 2011. This case had a significant impact on Swedish society. It prompted a newspaper to launch a campaign called Glöm inte Therese, or Don't Forget Therese, on June 12, 2009. As part of this campaign, money was raised to support the organisation BRIS, which works to help children in crisis. Although I'm sure this is small consolation for Therese's family.
I always knew there's evil on earth. An evil devil person hurt my sister, took her life from us.
This is the enraging case of Sabrina Haruni. Sabrina Haruni was born on the 27th of October 1997. Growing up in Gilbertsville, Sabrina was known by all for her kind heart and infectious smile. Her older sister Mariam described her as a gem, saying, "She was the heart of the family, she was the baby." But the baby of the family was growing up quickly and she had goals of earning her business degree. Sabrina had big plans for the future. Many of these plans included her boyfriend, Nicholas Foreman, a 23-year-old from Collegeville. She'd been dating Nicholas for around 7 months and she often stayed with him a few times a week at his rented room on Hamilton Road. She hadn't told her family about him yet, not even her sister. This was her little secret. It was the 3rd of February 2020, the day after the Super Bowl. It was a cold day in Pennsylvania. At Pottstown Pottstown Hospital and Uber speeds towards the emergency room. In the back of the car, Sabrina Haruni is unconscious. She is no longer breathing. Her boyfriend Nicholas holds her as she battles with life-threatening injuries. Sabrina is suffering from respiratory and cardiac arrest. She has bruising on her face and on her neck. There is dried blood coming from her nose. Her body is cold. The medical staff try frantically for nearly 2 hours to resuscitate her, but it's too late. Brenna Coyle was one of the nurses. She said, "We never had a pulse. She was never conscious in the emergency room." Sabrina Haruni, the baby of the family and a 22-year-old with her whole life to live, now was no longer alive. The police were called to the hospital straight away.
Sabrina Haruni, you will never be forgotten. It's a feeling like somebody took your heart out and just threw it away. I would do anything to go back and see her just one more time. She was the heart of our family. She was the baby, our angel. Your precious soul will live on until the end of time.
The victim was cold to the touch with blue lips and not breathing. County Detective John Wittenberger and State Police Trooper Richard W. Sanzik Jr. wrote in the arrest affidavit. Doctors told detectives Sabrina's body temperature was no more than 79 degrees and her pupils were blown out. The condition and injuries were consistent with a severe assault. Sabrina had been beaten, but the question was, by who? The police questioned boyfriend Nicholas Foreman. He was the last person to see her alive. After all, he had brought her into the hospital, so he must have had the answers. Nicholas told the Pottstown police that he and Sabrina had gone to the PJ Wellahans pub in Oaks on the 2nd of February. They'd gone to watch the Super Bowl. He said they'd been having a great time and were both in good spirits. At least they were, until Sabrina got into a verbal altercation with 3 females at the pub. There was arguing, there was shouting. Ultimately, Nicholas and Sabrina left to get an Uber home to his Perkiomen residence on Hamilton Road. But to their dismay, the 3 girls from the pub followed them there. They then jumped Sabrina. It was 3-on-1. Sabrina was badly beaten. Nicholas, though, said he was helpless. He couldn't get involved in the fight as he was already on probation for driving under the influence and resisting arrest. Nicholas also had past charges of disorderly conduct, criminal trespass and harassment in 2014. Therefore, if he got involved, things could get really bad for him. So he just watched on. After the fight with the 3 women was over, he carried Sabrina inside. She was injured, but she was still breathing. He checked on her until he fell asleep. At around 8:45 AM the next morning, Nicholas took an Uber to Limerick District Court. He had a preliminary court hearing for felony illicit substance charges. When he got back, he checked again on Sabrina. He tried to wake her up, but she wasn't coming round. For the second time that morning, he ordered an Uber. This time, he bundled his girlfriend's battered body into the back of the car and headed to the Pottstown Memorial Hospital. It was only a short drive and she was still breathing when they left. However, we know that she wouldn't be breathing for long. That was Nicholas's story, but something wasn't right. Nicholas wasn't worried about his girlfriend. In fact, he wasn't concerned at all after they arrived at the hospital. He was calm, he was just explaining how what he saw had happened. A Pottstown policeman explained, describing Nicholas's demeanour at the hospital. Nicholas never asked about Sabrina's condition either. He didn't ask about his girlfriend who had been beaten to within an inch of her life. In fact, he seemed to forget that she'd been jumped at all. At some point, the story he was giving wasn't matching the information we were getting, explained the same police officer. But even when detectives pressed Foreman about whether he was telling the truth, he said, 100%. Nicholas Foreman sent several Instagram messages to others in the days that followed. She got jumped by 3 girls really badly and she died before I could get her to the hospital, Foreman wrote in one message. He was sticking to his story. They began to look for the group of girls who had jumped Sabrina. Pretty quickly though, authorities realised these females didn't actually exist. Video surveillance footage from PJ Wellahans pub showed no evidence of Sabrina ever having an altercation with 3 women. In fact, the CCTV showed no evidence of Sabrina getting into an altercation with anyone at all. It actually showed a happy couple having a nice date night. There was nothing out of the ordinary. They were really happy, they were polite, they were smiling, seemed like a happy couple, described Ashley Nicole Pearson, their server. This whole thing just didn't make sense. The police began to explore other options. All eyes turned to the boyfriend. Nicholas was acting strange. He was the last to see her. He also had previous convictions. Police then seized his cell phone as part of the investigation. No one anticipated what they would find. It broke this case wide open. Detectives uncovered a 13-second video recording on his cell phone. The video was of Sabrina with blood on her face, lying on the grass area outside of Nicholas's residence. In the recording, a male voice is heard stating, "This is what a cheating liar gets. You hear me? Cheating liar." 3 days after Sabrina's death, Nicholas was arrested. On Thursday the 6th of February 2020, he was charged with 1st and 3rd degree murder. Upon arrest, he acted as though he was in disbelief. Continuing to peddle his story about the fight, he angrily told reporters,
Didn't do it. Why did you do it?
Didn't do it.
Who did?
3 girls. Not me.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
But no one believed him. Very quickly, the police had pieced together what really happened on that fateful night. After watching the Super Bowl at PJ Wellaghan's bar, the couple took an Uber home. In the car, Sabrina made a reference to receiving a text message from an ex-boyfriend. It was just a joke, a passing remark, but it irked Nicholas, who became increasingly agitated. Nicholas Foreman was jealous. He was angry. The thought of Sabrina texting an ex-boyfriend to him was completely unbearable. He demanded to see her phone. He wanted to see the text. She just tried to dismiss it. She kept trying to dismiss it, explained the Uber driver. When Sabrina refused, Nicholas told her that she couldn't come home with him until she showed him the phone. Sabrina didn't know how to respond, telling him to cut it out, you're scaring me, as he got angrier and more irate. The Uber arrived at Nicholas's place and the two got out, but Nicholas wasn't ready to let it go just yet. They continued to argue in the driveway. The Uber driver was concerned and hung around. There was yelling in the driveway and maybe a flailing of the arms, and there was arguing going on. I heard the sound of something breaking, the Uber driver explained. Not wanting to leave, he pulled over and waited 10 minutes or so until the shouting stopped. And it did. So the Uber driver left. But for Sabrina, the nightmare was only just beginning. After the argument, Nicholas Foreman attacked Sabrina. It wasn't a group of women, she was jumped by her own boyfriend. A witness named Brady Reese said that he had seen Sabrina stumbling and appearing to say help, but Nicholas insisted that she was just drunk. He said Sabrina gave a thumbs up and the two walked away. Nicholas continued a sustained attack before ending her life as she lay helpless on the grass. The autopsy determined that Sabrina passed from asphyxia, strangulation, and multiple blunt force injuries. As she lay motionless, he used his cell phone to take the video that was key to his arrest. He then dragged her body into his home, leaving marks across the yard. Her bracelet, plastic beaded letters that spelt out Sabrina, was found in the yard. The evidence was damning. Nicholas's vital fluids was found on Sabrina's denim jacket and Sabrina's was found on his. He didn't cover his tracks, not at all. In fact, in an act that showed his coldness and contempt for Sabrina, after dragging her inside, Nicholas went outside and sat in the car of an ex-girlfriend. Meanwhile, Sabrina Haruni fought for her life just meters away inside his home. If she had received medical attention straight away, there is a chance that she may have survived. But instead of taking her to the hospital, he sat with another woman for an hour. They talked, they kissed. Nicholas posted on Snapchat. He then went inside and went to sleep. He seemingly never even considered getting help for Sabrina.
I had never heard of his name until we heard that he was arrested.
It's just sad, man, you know, that a young kid like that, and you know, so brutal. It's like, why?
On the 19th of August 2021, Nicholas Foreman went on trial at Montgomery County Court. He was tried for first and third degree murder. First degree, which was intentional, carries a sentence of life imprisonment. Third degree, which is an attack without intent, is 20 to 40 years in prison. The prosecutors argued that Nicholas had many chances to get help for Sabrina, but didn't. This is a specific intent to kill in this case because he did not seek medical treatment for her. Instead, he hid her away so nobody could help her. The words of DA Kevin Steele, and he continued, "Each of these acts that put her in that condition is a deliberate act. Hitting, compression, choking, all deliberate actions."
Sabrina's not here to tell us the truth. And they're taking what this monster said and spreading it. And I just ask for respect of Sabrina. She was an angel on earth, and now she's an angel for us, watching over us. Your light will never be dimmed until we meet again.
Defense lawyer Michael A. John sought a mistrial due to emotional outbursts in court. As the key cell phone footage was played in the court, Sabrina's mother, Rabia, had shouted, "How could you do that to my baby?" But the mistrial was denied by Judge William R. Carpenter. The judge simply cautioned jurors not to let their emotions or sympathy impact their deliberations. But they didn't need their emotions or sympathy to make the right decision. The evidence here said it all. The jury took just 90 minutes to come to a decision. They found him guilty of first-degree murder. He asked to be sentenced immediately. On August 19th, 2021, Nicholas Foreman was sentenced to life in prison.